Solid stands for solidarity. We've got a solid economy. Solidarity.
Which group wants to go first?
We seem to focus in pretty quickly on our public institutions, the hospitals, the universities, buying from and supporting local co-ops and assisting in education, community education of what co-ops are, what they can look like, what a co-op economy can look like. Some of the things that we talked about were ways to build on the history of cooperatives in Worcester. This is co-ops are not a new thing in Worcester. There have been various types of co-ops, cooperative houses, cooperative farms, cooperative businesses in the Worcester community since at least the 1970s, and obviously going way back before that. We're looking at a way to build on the history of cooperatives in Worcester, use it as part of a plank on which to build further, if only to say, look, this is what Worcester has always offered, this is what we can continue to offer. We talked of ways to leverage and work with the work being done by the Community Labor Coalition around community benefit agreements, and possibly bring existing co-ops in the city together into that campaign that aren't already a part of it, into that campaign and work to facilitate more community benefit agreements that include cooperatives. Matt mentioned that there already has been a receptiveness to that shown through their use of the cooperative landscaping business and other things. Specifically, we would put our energies behind a campaign to pressure public institutions, either singling out a specific institution or widespread, to divest or to start replacing food vendors, bookstores, other on-campus vendors, other on-site vendors. Start replacing stuff they get from corporations with similar or better products from local co-ops and local vendors. We focus mainly on food and bookstore, but there are also other services involved. So we mentioned that the green jobs money, the state is sitting on $16 billion of jobs money. $6 billion of that is earmarked specifically for green jobs, and a significant 3% of that is earmarked for Worcester. We talked about looking at ways to pressure getting that money released to help fund co-ops, which would build jobs, build economic justice, would help us tie into some other community groups that are working specifically around unemployment and economic justice and building community capacity. Part of what we looked at when we started going through and saying, wait, we're not talking about these other things, part of what we felt is that co-op conversions, scaling up co-ops, and pressuring institutions to adopt co-ops tend to build off each other, and they're kind of synergistic. And so we were looking at projects that could build on and make use of strategies for all three of them. Specifically, in terms of, we were looking at some possible educational events, working with Matt, the organization you were talking about, the event in the spring.
Eastern Conference
The
for
Eastern
Workplace
Conference.
Democracy.
And also about the possibility of increasing Sage's capacity to be a facilitator for business co-op conversions. So I know that doesn't boil down to a particular project or campaign. That's the direction we were heading in, essentially facilitating co-op conversions and educating the community about the benefits and potential of co-ops.
Does it reach a broad range of people?
We identified close to a dozen different organizations, co-ops, and stakeholders that could be brought into the campaign and whom it would affect.
Does it move the solidarity economy forward?
We think undoubtedly it does. Our public, here in Worcester in particular, our public institutions, the hospitals, the universities, the colleges, and the government are major consumers, and when they move in that direction, then it moves the entire community towards accepting a co-op economy.
All right, thank you. That was an excellent job.
Thank you.
In a pretty different direction. We got really excited about the idea of working with our educational institutions and our youth institutions to create co-ops there in places like vocational high schools and youth centers as after-school programs and summer school programs, and using smaller programs like that to build power with students and parents in order to introduce co-op creation and co-op running into the curricula of schools, potentially, both high schools and community colleges and universities. And we think that this would be a good way to reach our communities, to involve families from the communities in determining some of their economic future.
We decided that we should start from the youth and that we should find more ways to inform and interact ourselves in Worcester's assemblies and activities that we actually do as a community, and that we should be able to advocate for our issues, and that people won't know what we're doing unless we tell them. Because some people, they don't try to look for the issues themselves and just go with it. So we're trying to find ways to interact with our community and inform people in different ways.
Yeah, I think key parts of that under the concrete ideas, we're also developing literature and training ourselves to basically say how all of these principles are connected to each other. So really working on our messaging, both in literature and bringing it to media in whatever ways possible. Zines, other things in our outreach work, which is probably more youth-led. And also the other part of that was starting with ourselves, uniting these principles, but also dealing with how we're working around power dynamics in our own groups, and basically making those nourishing environments and inclusive environments, and bringing that into the principles and into our work, and then just having community events as well around different issues.
First, so we talked about the idea or the necessity of a community hub directory / network that will allow people from different co-ops, different other models from the alternate economies to really get together and network with each other to essentially complete the supply chain. The idea being that we can move things forward, we can move things backwards. You can say, all right, I want to work with sustainable fabrics. Oh, hey, I'm a sustainable fabric producer, and we can
you
partner.
slow down?
Sure, sorry. And we can have a virtual space that is cataloging these people and allowing them to find and build the connections to, again, complete that chain, and then also plug in what's a need that we have in the community. What are the individuals within the community looking for? So you can join it and participate in it either as a group or as someone who's looking to participate in co-ops, just to get that information out there. Now, we understand that that's a project that a lot of people are already working on, but it's also one that tends to fall by the wayside as it gets overwhelming. So coming up with ways to make that an achievable project seems like a really good place to start. Like maybe you have to self-register in order, and we can make it really open, or maybe, anyway, that's something that would need to be kind of figured out. The other thing that we can do with this space is host those educational materials that the other group was talking about, so that you can have various packets that are complete presentations or plug-and-play presentations. And that way, members of a community can go in and, all right, I want to initiate this conversation within the town meetings that are existing. Here's everything that I need to be able to be the one to bring it to my community. Issues around that are the inclusiveness and the accessibility, because we really want everyone to, we feel like there's a lot of great stuff happening, but not everybody's aware of each other. And we want to drawstring that all together, but we don't want to block anybody up in that process. And again, a lot of it is about awareness and education, because we have people who might participate in the co-op model if they knew what it was, or participate in the gifting economy if they knew what it was, or are already participating in that to some extent, but weren't really aware that that was the model that they were operating under. So the more that we can do to generate that sort of understanding, especially through literature and community assemblies, so basically going in and facilitating and saying, what are the issues in your community, and how can we help you pursue these?
And that there's a potential resource sitting out there. As somebody who works in the foreclosure, anti-foreclosure movement, there are certainly dozens, possibly hundreds of properties in Worcester that we can now show were illegally foreclosed and aren't owned by the bank that's sitting on them right now. And that in fact, it's possible that the best claim to those properties rests with a former homeowner somewhere. But the financial resource of having a property for workers in a co-op, for instance, to live and not have to pay outrageous rents, setting it up so that it might be space that a business could use on the first floor, for instance, or office space or whatever, and the property around it for growing food, that those properties in theory don't belong to the folks who claim they have them, so why shouldn't we have them?
Sort of the primary sort of focus to a lot of the first couple parts was first we were calling it sort of like a directory, creating a directory where like we could all sort of like bolster each other up, or like all be part of some kind of like painful time. And that kind of like when we were talking, when we were critiquing it about whether or not it is ambitious, that sort of developed into more of the conversation of creating some sort of a central hub that would help to like bolster all the co-ops but in the lens of being inclusive, not only being co-ops but also other community groups all being part of some hub and help each other in some way.
You know, SAGE has regular meetings that are scheduled and planned, and the next meeting is already there. So I think that next meeting will be a really critical time to take these kind of thought out ideas and work through the kind of the, you know, what was just mentioned around the kind of like the action planning steps and all of that. So
Thank you, and have a good rest of the weekend.
Now we're full and we have the capacity. We're gonna build a solid economy.